Those of you who've been watching The Other Side for a while will know that we've covered quite closely the inquiry in the ACT that was looking into whether charges should have ever been laid by the Territory's public prosecutor, Shane Drumgold, against Bruce Lehrmann over the allegation that he raped Brittany Higgins. The findings of that inquiry have now been reported. Former Queensland judge Walter Sofronoff was the chairman of the inquiry, and he handed his findings to the ACT's Chief Minister, Andrew Barr, on Monday. But Mr. Barr isn't making them public. Unbelievable. Your tax money, folks, but the Labor Green government of the ACT says, nah, you're not allowed to see the findings yet, kids, sorry. Mr. Barr says the findings of the inquiry won't be released for a month as the government determines how to deal with what are likely to be serious adverse findings against ACT Chief Prosecutor Shane Drumgold. Drumgold has been on leave since May, but the Australian newspaper says it's got a hold of a copy of the report. So thank God for journalism, and once again for the Murdoch media for keeping us informed where the ABC and others failed. The report finds that Drumgold knowingly lied to the Supreme Court, engaged in serious malpractice and grossly unethical conduct, preyed on a junior lawyer's inexperience, betrayed that junior lawyer who trusted him, and treated criminal litigation as, quote, a poker game in which a prosecutor can hide the cards. No wonder the Labor Green cowards don't want us to see this report as we are entitled to. So don't blame us if the reporting is inaccurate, as we're delivering the news second-hand here in the public interest and doing our best despite your attempts to stop us, Mr. Barr. What a total disgrace this ACT government is. A Labor Greens coalition. Imagine that at a federal level. Anyway, regardless of the findings about Drumgold himself, this board of inquiry was held in May and was designed to examine the actions of Drumgold and the police during the investigation and the trial of Mr. Lehrmann. One very important finding is that the public prosecutor was right to press charges based on the evidence available at the time. Mr. Sofronoff's findings reportedly state that police acted lawfully when they charged Mr. Lehrmann, and that Mr. Drumgold's decision to proceed with the prosecution was correct. But that only means that there was enough evidence to proceed with a prosecution attempt. It does not say anything about Lehrmann's guilt or innocence. It just means that Drumgold didn't do anything wrong in going ahead with the prosecution. Bruce Lehrmann also isn't happy about the fact that the report isn't being released yet. You see leaks popping up in the news. He told the Daily Mail newspaper that his interests weren't properly safeguarded during the inquiry process and he wasn't allowed legal representation at the inquiry, and his request for funding was denied. Lehrmann was tried in the ACT Supreme Court back in October, but the trial was derailed when a juror who brought banned research material into the jury room was uncovered. Then in December, Mr. Drumgold announced that there would not be a retrial because of concerns over Ms. Higgins' mental health, which has left Mr. Lehrmann without any way to clear his name in court. Higgins then reportedly received a multi-million-dollar payout from the federal government for workplace injury to her mental health and future career impacts. Media commentators have suggested that this far exceeds normal payouts for workplace injuries, and there have been calls from the federal opposition for an inquiry into the payment to Ms. Higgins. Ms. Higgins has subsequently undertaken a number of jobs, including a United Nations internship. But back to the Sofronoff inquiry. This inquiry itself was actually set up by Shane Drumgold to look into the behaviours of the Australian Federal Police, who look after local policing in the ACT, and their handling of this case with his office. Somehow I don't think Mr. Drumgold thought things were going to turn out quite this way, and nor was the ACT government. But the Australian newspaper reports that Walter Sofronoff says every one of the allegations made by Mr. Drumgold that sparked the inquiry was baseless. The newspaper says the findings may lead to criminal prosecution against Drumgold for perversion of the course of justice. Wow. If so, the Labor Greens ACT coalition government has a lot to answer for. Mr. Sofronoff reportedly found that Mr. Drumgold had lost objectivity and, quote, did not act with fairness and detachment as was required by his role. And, the Australian reports, Sofronoff said he was deeply disturbed by Mr. Drumgold's ignorance of ethical principles and accused him of a Pontius Pilate-like detachment. Three of the most serious findings in this report were these. Number one, that he made representations to Chief Justice Lucy McCallum in the proceedings against Mr. Lehrmann that were untrue and an invention of his own. Number two, that he was guilty of a serious breach of duty by failing to comply with the golden rule of disclosure that sits at the heart of a fair trial by failing to disclose documents where there was simply no doubt that those police investigation documents should have been disclosed. And thirdly, that the DPP kept the defence in the dark about the steps that he was taking to deny them from the documents that meant that they were in no position to even mount a challenge. This is super damning stuff and completely astounding, really. No wonder the government doesn't want it out there, because they can't escape their ultimate responsibility here. The main document that Drumgold didn't give to the defence team was the so-called Mueller report, which was an internal briefing police note by Detective Superintendent Scott Mueller that detailed discrepancies in Ms. Higgins' evidence and suggested police didn't think there was enough evidence to prosecute Mr. Lehrmann. Pretty important stuff. As far as the role of the police was concerned, Sofronoff found that they, quote, performed their duties in absolute good faith, with great determination, although faced with obstacles, and they put together a sound case. They conducted a thorough investigation, he said. Sofronoff also said the inquiry itself wasn't justified by any of Drumgold's allegations. 6 months of time and money spent, personal and professional consequences, an inquiry that's caused lasting pain to many people and which has demonstrated the allegations to be not just incorrect, but wholly false and without any rational basis. The office of the DPP will now face a multi-million-dollar claim by Mr. Lehrmann on the grounds of malfeasance following Mr. Sofronoff's findings of gross misconduct by Mr. Drumgold.